Hi guys, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the ISU-122S, the Tier 7 Russian Premium Tank Destroyer, the one that isn't the SU-122-44 that I reviewed quite recently. This was a tank that was made available a few months ago as part of the Berlin Quartet series of premium tanks on most servers, although here on the EU server it was made available as a separate purchase not so long ago. The tank is currently not available for purchase from the Detectory or from the gift shop, although I have absolutely no doubts that Wargaming will put it on sale again in future. And I suppose the question we're going to be asking today is the ISU-122S worth it, considering there's already the SU-122-44 available in-game? Well, let's find out. Now, as per usual, let's start with the history of the tank. Now, the ISU-122S kind of is an accident. It was never really planned. Around 1944, early 1944, there were two variants of Russian tank destroyer, two assault guns that were very, very similar. The first one was the SU-152 that actually came with the 152mm howitzer as standard, hence the name SU-152. Now, what this was it was an assault gun mounted on the chassis of the KV-1S. Alongside the SU-152, we had the ISU-152, which is basically the same tank. It was mounted with a 152mm howitzer, but it was built on the chassis of an IS, not a KV-1S. However, in early 1944, due to a shortage of 152mm howitzers, but a surplus of IS chassis, it was decided to try mounting the 122mm gun on the ISU-152. It was done successfully and became known as the ISU-122. It went into prototype stage around April 1944 and into full production around August. About 2,000 of the ISU-122s were built. However, this is the ISU-122S. And the major difference between these tanks is the ISU-122 was mounted with an early version of the 122mm, and even though it was quite successful, the rate of fire was only about 2 rounds a minute. The 122mm mounted on the ISU-122S is a later variant of the 122mm. As a result, it got a rate of fire of around 4 rounds a minute. So about 700 ISU-122Ss were built, and about 2,000 ISU-122s were built. The tank did see combat towards the end of World War II. It was quite successful. It stayed in service up till about 1960 when they were decommissioned, but quite a lot of ISU-122s and ISU-122Ss were handed over to civilian authorities throughout Russia. They're mainly used for vehicle recovery, obviously without the gun, but they're still used apparently for vehicle recovery and for towing and deliveries in Arctic regions of the USSR. So as per usual, we're going to be comparing the ISU-122S against all its Tier 7 premium tank destroyer rivals, although just to keep things in context, I've also included the SU-152 up here, the regular Tier 7 Russian tank destroyer. Starting off with the hit points, you can see it comes in fairly average. It comes in with actually it's pretty good, 870 hit points. That's significantly more hit points than the SU-122 or the E-25, slightly less hit points than the T-28, but not by much, only 10, and significantly less hit points than the AT-15A. So it's pretty average. In fact, it gets the same hit points as the SU-152. It does mean it can take an extra hit and adds a little bit more survivability than maybe the SU-122-44 has. As weight, it's pretty average as well. It weighs pretty much the same as the SU-152 at 46 tons. However, it's heavier than the SU-122 or the E-25 and significantly lighter than the T-28 concept or the AT-15A. So average hit points and average weight. The engine power on paper does not look quite so good, however. It only gets a 600 horsepower engine, which makes it the second weakest engine on paper. In fact, only the SU-122-44 has a worse engine. It does match, however, the SU-152 in-game, so even though it's a premium tank of the same tier, it gets the same final engine as the SU-152. But it definitely has less engine power than something like the T-28 concept. Even the AT-15A has it beaten. The top speed, however, is quite good at 43 kilometers an hour. Again, not the fastest. That goes down to the E25. SU-122-44 is significantly faster as well. However, it matches the SU-152. So same engine power and same top speed as the in-game tank. There is a slight advantage for the ISU-122S, however. The horsepower to weight ratio is slightly better, not by much, but slightly better on the ISU-122S. And in addition to having slightly better horsepower to weight ratio, it also has slightly better ground resistance. So the tank actually accelerates a little bit better and can reach its top speed a little bit quicker than maybe the SU-152 can. So it's not a slow tank, even though it looks quite big and it looks quite sluggish. 43 kilometers an hour is quite good, and it can actually reach 43 kilometers an hour, although it does take its time getting there, and sometimes you need a hill to help you. The traverse speed on paper is pretty average. Again, it's definitely not as good as the SU-122-44 or the E25, but much better than the T28 Concept or the AT-15A. Premium tank traverse speeds are kind of messed up a little bit. They don't tell the whole story. I've been corrected frequently in the past. On paper, the traverse speed actually looks better than the SU-152, but however, as I say, I've been corrected in the past. That's just on paper. In performance, perhaps the traverse speed is very, very similar to the SU-152. I'm not quite sure. I do play both of these tanks, and I don't notice much traverse speed difference between the two of them. The gun traverse speed is pretty similar across the board. It gets 23 degrees per second gun traverse, similar to the SU-122, similar to the AT-15A and the SU-152. Only the T28 Concept is worse, and only the E25s is better. However, as I've said before, gun traverse speed on a tank destroyer is not that important. More the traverse speed of the tank is. The view range, however, is pretty good at 350 meters. Now, that means it gets better view range than the SU-152. Much better view range. It gets significantly better view range than the SU-122-44. Similar view range to the AT-15A. In fact, only the E25 and T28 Concept have it beaten, but view range is definitely one of the ISU-122's strength over the SU-122-44. It's not the best, it's not the worst, in fact it's pretty average across the board. The only place that the ISU-122S is significantly worse than any of the other tanks up here is its signal range. It only gets 440 meters of signal range. Now that means you are going to be losing contact. If you're on one flank, you're not going to be able to see what's happening on the other flank. You're going to lose contact with friendly tanks, you're not going to know what's happening, and you're going to have to keep an eye on the kill feed to try and figure out what's happening. So the signal range is definitely not good on the ISU-122S. The SU-122-44 is much, much better, as is the SU-152 in-game. So popping into Tanks GG, let's have a quick look at the armor on the ISU-122S, because on paper it actually gets better armor than the SU-122-44. It's got 90mm on paper frontal armor, but that doesn't tell the whole story, because you do have some sloping going on here. And what that means is basically the front of this tank is between about 90 and 110mm of effective armor all round. You can see that the lower glacis here is quite big, it's quite flat, but it's 105mm. Upper glacis 129. As we move across, you can see that the front of this tank can be penned. Even though it does have slight sloping, you can see that the effective frontal armor is about 100mm to the left of the gun mantlet. The right of the gun mantlet, harder to hit, smaller target, but still very, very flat, about 100mm of effective armor. It's got the traditional Russian tank destroyer gun mantlet, very, very effective, but it's also quite inconsistent. You can actually, believe it or not, pen the front of this tank through the gun mantlet. However, as I say, it's inconsistent. I have been penned through the gun mantlet, but I've probably bounced more than I've actually been penned. You can see that the effective armor is very good in some areas, very, very high effective armor, but then in other areas you can see just below the gun mantlet, just below the gun here, it's only 100mm of effective armor. So higher penetration guns can pen the gun mantlet on this tank, but you can't count on it. It's not 100% going to go through. through. There is also a weak spot that should be noted on the gun mantlet. You can see it cut out here, just underneath the bottom left corner of the gun mantlet. There's a small square area. If you can get shots in there, it's only about 70 millimeters of effective armor, or even worse. You can pen the gun mantlet through here. Another thing that's worth noting is, like the ISU-122-44, the top of the tank is very, very poorly armored. So Arty, you're going to want to be targeting these things. You can hit, you can penetrate, but not only is the top of the tank very, very poorly armored, the top of the gun mantlet, just like the SU-122-44, very poorly armored. However, unlike the SU-122-44, where it's very, very hard to hit the gun mantlet from the front, you can actually hit the gun mantlet from the front of the ISU-122S. So if you've got an accurate gun and you know what you're doing and you're facing this tank head on, you can actually pen and overmatch the top of the gun mantlet. You can see it, unlike the SU-122-44. However, the question I would want to ask is, why are you going for such a difficult shot here when you could just shoot the tank here or here? So the mantlet is not perfect. It can be penned, but it's still quite troll. It's a Russian gun mantlet after all. The tank's armor is not fantastic. Most tanks that it's going to be facing are going to be able to pen it if they can avoid that gun mantlet. The side armor is 90 millimeters as well. Now that makes it better side armor than the SU-122-44 or the SU-152. The side armor can be quite good and you can side scrape, but what you need to be careful of is, you can see these angled cheeks on both sides of the tank. Now they are going to be bounce zones if you're shooting it from the front. That armor, quite good. You can see from the front, when it's facing you directly, the side armor, those shoulders are very, very good. However, if this tank tries to side scrape, what it's doing is it may side scrape. Look at this, 400 millimeters of effective armor on the side. But again, if you're fighting someone who knows what they're doing, they're just going to shoot you in the cheek. And by straightening up this tank, this very, very good cheek suddenly becomes very, very pennable. It's only 94 millimeters. Even on the other side, 102 millimeters. So as soon as this tank starts side scraping, ignore the side, just shoot it in the cheek. You're going to be able to penetrate it, no problem. So the armor, it's only good against inexperienced players, pretty much. I would say that the armor can be a little bit troll, but don't count on your armor for survivability when you're driving an SU-122S. So let's have a closer look at this gun. Like the SU-122-44 covered on the channel recently, it's 122mm. However, it's a later model of the D25. It's the D25S, and as a result, it actually, although the stats look very, very similar between the two guns, it does have a faster rate of fire. So 122mm gun gives you the regular 175mm of penetration. That's fine against tier 7s, it's okay against most tier 8s, it's going to struggle against some tier 9s. Same problems as you usually have with 122mm. However, the rate of fire is very, very good. In fact, the rate of fire on this gun is much, much better than it is on something like the SU-122-44. Let's bring up the stats for that. You can see significant change in the rate of fire. So 7.5 rounds a minute on the SU-122-44, and that is a very good rate of fire. But compared to 8.1 on the SU-122S, or ISU-122S, it's just, the rate of fire is scary. Now, while I praise the SU-122-44 for its amazing DPM, it gets to up to around 3,100 DPM, 3,200 DPM with equipment and crew skills. Well, this tank, the SU-122S, gets 3,100 DPM without equipment and crew skills. So if you add equipment and crew skills onto this tank, the DPM can be absolutely insane. You can get it up to 3,300, even, I'm sure, hypothetically 3,400 DPM. A rate of fire, very, very good. So the DPM on this gun is even better than the insane DPM on the SU-122-44. It's one of this tank's main strengths. Incredible DPM, nice alpha damage, decent penetration, incredible rate of fire. However, it's a Russian 122mm, so you're going to have exactly the same problems with the accuracy, 0.41. Some shots are going to be amazing. You'll be able to snipe cupolas from 400 meters away. Other shots, not even going to hit or reach the enemy tank. The gun handling, exactly the same as most Russian 122mm. The aim time, again, just like the SU-122-44, not fantastic. 2.9 0.9 second aim time. So once again, you've got very, very poor gun arc. The gun arc on this tank is not great. The gun depression is not great. Again, you're limited to 4 degrees of gun depression. So poor gun arc, poor gun depression, and long aim time means you're going to be going through that aim time over and over and over again. So really, the only major advantage this tank has over the ISU-122-44 is its rate of fire. The rate of fire and DPM are even better on this tank. However, having said that, if you mount the 122mm on the ISU-152, the DPM and rate of fire are identical. So the gun is identical on both the ISU-152 in-game and the ISU-122S. So let's see this gun in action. We are here on Mines in a very, very favorable matchup. I'm in a match with Bringy and Sergeant Moose Teats, I'm just going to call him Moose as I normally do. We are top tier here on Mines. Normally, as I'm going to be saying throughout the rest of this review, I think that this tank, it's a tank that is better played passively, especially when you get it into higher tier games, but that doesn't mean you need to play it passively. When you're top tier, you could definitely play this thing aggressively, just like you would with an ISU-122-44. You can play it aggressively. And this tank is all about its DPM. As you can see, the three of us are going to be moving up the 8 line, and it's not a slow tank. I said, you know, it's not as quick as the ISU-122-44, but it's not slow. We're doing 30 kilometers an hour. We can reach top speed by going downhill. But what you're going to be seeing is just the raw DPM and the raw alpha damage here. I'm playing aggressively, I'm playing like a heavy tank because I'm top tier. I'm going to be using third person here. You can see an outline, I'm shooting through walls. Aiming, and boom. 454, so just like the ISU-122-44, great alpha damage. But look at the reload, I'm already reloaded, ready to go back to work. So, again, didn't have much to shoot at, and there's that poor armor. 90mm, put it through my top of the tank there. Killed a driver, or no, killed a gunner, killed my gunner. And with the gun mounted on the left of the tank, sometimes you expose a lot of your tanks to try and get shots when you're shooting around left-hand corners. But, come on, Irish. Okay, I've just been spotted. Tiger P has moved back up. RT is going for me. There are 3 RT in this game. But I'm staying relatively RT safe. And I'm just wondering whether or not I can shoot him as he comes around the corner of the building. I'm thinking maybe a wall is in the way. But nope, no, he is behind the building. I thought maybe I would have had the front of his tank. So I am shooting, I do a lot of shooting in third person here. But time to be aggressive again because I'm not getting shots. If I'm not shooting tanks and I'm not spotting tanks, I'm not having any contribution on the game. So I'm going to push forward. I really am surprised, you know, they didn't send any tanks down the C line, but we're able to advance. Trying to stay RT safe, and the camo rating on this tank is surprisingly good. It's a little bit troll. Sometimes I get spotted when I don't expect to, sometimes I manage to shoot when I'm expecting to get spotted and I stay hidden. But we're flanking. Look at this, we're in a big, slow, heavy tank destroyer, and we've just flanked a Tiger P. So, I mean, the tank is not the quickest, but it can work. And look at that rate of fire. So, 665 damage done to a Tiger P in about, I'd say about 6 seconds. So I get spotted, hiding behind the building till I know I've dropped off radar, and now I can push up, start using these bushes on the corner. Gonna sit here, let my binocs kick in, see if I spot anything. Not spotting anything, so move up, and I've got rear shots. Got rear shots on the tanks in the north. So we're going to work on a poor Tog. Easy side shots. Look at the rate of fire. Look at the alpha damage. Oh, Jagdpanzer. And I'm wondering, is he still there? I just see that RT. Yep. Okay, so, I mean, the gun is troll, but it's incredibly accurate sometimes. So, I know there's an RT to my left. Gun is a little bit troll. Managed to track the KB3. Going for lower glacis and bounce on the KB3. Okay, but Tiger P showing me his side. Look at the rate of fire. 370. Now these are low rolls. That was a low roll. But there's kill number 3. And what you're going to see here is this KV-2 being annihilated. So get one shot in. And almost reloaded. And we just put another shot in. Okay, must have tracked him. 0 damage. Gonna blind shot again. There we go. Second blind shot. Now, what you're going to see in chat now is that KV-3, who's a good player. That KV-3 is a very good player. Oh, here's this gun again. Look at this accuracy. Sometimes it's so accurate and sometimes it's horrible. But it differs. It differs. But in chat, that KV-3 is going to start asking about the rate of fire. Because the rate of fire of this gun, there you go, what's the reload on the ISU-122S? The rate of fire is just shockingly good. People underestimate it. But one hit kill on the FV-304, just 2 RT left. I'm going for my top gun. But you could just see the raw alpha damage, the raw DPM, and the fact you can actually play this tank aggressively if you need to and you're top tier. So here's my top gun, and I miss. Yeah, I fail. I miss my top gun. Bringy takes him out, and point blank range, and I miss and hit the ground in front of me. It's just the Russian gun, guys. Sometimes it can snipe cupolas from 400 meters, and sometimes it misses shots at point blank range, costing me top gun. But I love the gun on the ISU-122-44, even though it trolls the heck out of you sometimes. And I love the gun on the ISU-122S. It's got even better rate of fire, even better DPM. And as I say, when you're top tier in a match like that, you can actually play the tank destroyer more aggressively. Although I do recommend maybe playing it a little bit more passively when you get it into higher tier games. But that was an ace tanker game. I also picked up a high caliber, just showing off the gun. 1232 XP, 3,861 damage. Now, that was mainly shooting tier 7s, tier 6s, and lower tier tanks, so quite a nice damage game. You could rack up the damage very, very quickly. 5 kills, still annoyed I didn't get top gun, but that's just the gun trolling me. 18 fired, 15 hits, so the gun can be accurate, it can miss, and I probably missed a couple of those shots down to my poor aim. Can't blame the gun for them. 15 hits and 12 penetrations. When you're shooting same tier, lower tier tanks, the penetration's just fine. Penetration's a little bit lacking against higher tier tanks, but you can dish out damage very, very quickly. Spotted 2, damaged 8, destroyed 5, did 472 assistance damage, and it's not a bad money maker. It's as good as the ISU-122-44, wasn't firing any premium and made 72,000 credits in a tier 7 game. So I suppose the major question some of you out there are asking is, how does the ISU-122S compare to the in-game tank? Because obviously, you're going to be having the crew XP benefits from playing a premium tank. You're also going to be having the credit-making potential of playing a premium tank. But really, is the experience of driving the ISU-122S any worse or better than driving the in-game SU-152? Well, starting off, the two tanks are almost identical on paper, but the ISU-122S actually does have some advantages. It gets a slightly better horsepower to weight ratio, so it accelerates slightly better. It gets slightly better ground resistance than the SU-152 does. It gets slightly better traverse speed than the SU-152 does. It gets much, much better armor. You can see 90mm on front, 90 on the sides, 60 on the rear, compared to 75 on the front and 60 on the side of the SU-152. So better armor as well as better acceleration slightly and better traverse. The rate of fire, if you're using the 122mm on the SU-152, DPM, rate of fire, and all the gun handling stats are identical between the two tanks. The ISU-122S also gets an advantage when it comes to view range. It gets 350 meters of view range compared to 330 meters of view range on the SU-152, and about the only place it actually suffers is signal range, 440 meters compared to 625. So I would say, compared to the in-game SU-152, the ISU-122S is slightly better in almost every single way, mainly down to its armor and view range. So another question I'm going to try to answer, because I'm sure some of you are going to be asking it, is why? Why would you buy an ISU-122S over an SU-122-44? I love this tank. I love the SU-122-44. It is fast, it is maneuverable, it is flexible, it is versatile. It doesn't matter what map you get it onto. There's a job that the ISU-122-44 can do. So why would you drive an ISU-122S or prefer to have this tank over the ISU-122-44? Well, it's a very, very good question. I mean, on paper, some areas of the ISU-122S are better. It gets more hit points. It technically gets more armor, 90 millimeters of side armor compared to 75 on the ISU-122-44. The rate of fire is better. The DPM is better on the ISU-122S. And then on top of that, the view range is better. 350 meters of view range compared to 330 on the ISU-122-44. So in a lot of ways, the ISU-122S is better than the ISU-122-44. However, you've got to take the speed, maneuverability, and sheer flexibility of the ISU-122-44 into context. This gun, or this tank, is fast, it's maneuverable, can get into position, can get out of position, can relocate. It can be a lot of fun to play. It doesn't matter what map you get this tank onto. It can be played passively and it can be played aggressively. I think the ISU-122-44 is a more flexible tank than the ISU-122S. I think this is more of a traditional tank destroyer. You can play it passively and it probably does it better than the ISU-122-44 does it, mainly down to its view range. It can spot its own targets a little bit better. The camo rating is very good on both tanks, but I think definitely the DPM and view range give the ISU-122S an edge when you're playing passively. However, when you want to play actively or when you need to relocate, then the ISU-122-44 has the edge. The ISU-122S is also a better crew trainer, so even though I don't think this is a bad tank, don't think the ISU-122-44 is a bad crew trainer. The ISU-122S, I'll come to crew training a little bit more later on in the review, but I think definitely the ISU-122S can make money as well as the ISU-122-44 can. It's a better crew trainer, and it's more down to the player. If you prefer playing tank destroyers passively, then definitely the ISU-122S is probably a slightly better tank, down to its better DPM and view range. However, if you like playing flexible tanks, fast maneuverable tanks, ones that don't rely on the map or matchmaking, tanks that can flank, then yeah, ISU-122-44 is just an absolutely amazing tank, even though the view range isn't quite as good or the DPM isn't quite as good as it is on the ISU-122S. It's really down to your playstyle. Both of these tanks are very, very good. So let's talk about equipment, and there are quite a few equipment choices for this tank, and a lot of them are viable. But starting off with vents. Now, I do have vents on the tank, and I kind of threw vents on simply because I happen to have spare vents in the depot and was low on credits at the time I got this tank, so didn't want to buy any other pieces of equipment. I haven't removed them since. Vents are okay, they're viable, but I do think, depending on your style of play, maybe there are better pieces of equipment. Every time I play this tank, I think maybe I should remove vents and then put on a camo net instead, but then again, vents give me, even slightly less or slightly more DPM on amazing DPM anyway. Improves my view range slightly over the view range on the tank. Yeah, so vents, every time I think about removing them, I end up keeping them, but viable, it's really up to you. Wet ammo rack is, again, viable, although I don't tend to get ammo racked very much in this tank. Usually it's crew members who are getting knocked out or loaders who are getting knocked out, not my ammo rack. I don't remember getting ammo racked once, not once, during any of my play games or play session games for this review, but it's really up to you. If you find yourself getting ammo racked, then yep, go for a wet ammo rack, but I don't think it's viable. Very, very expensive. And if you're playing this tank to its strengths and you're playing it passively in a lot of maps, then you're not going to get shot at in the first place. So moving on, toolbox, a viable piece of equipment. If you've got a brand new crew in here, if you've got a bad crew without a repair skill, you don't want to get tracked in this tank because enemy tanks can get to your side and rear so easily. So toolbox, if you've got a spare equipment slot, you've got a spare toolbox in your depot, and you've got a bad crew on the tank, then the toolbox is not going to do the tank any harm. Large caliber gun rammer, absolutely must on this tank. 3,100 DPM without a gun rammer. Put a gun rammer on this tank, the DPM is just absolutely insane. So definitely worth putting on the tank. Heavy spall liner, again, I have been taking a little bit of HE damage, have been taking splash damage. Find my crew members tend to get knocked out quite a bit in this tank, but it's really up to you. Again, I prefer not getting shot in the first place, but if you are playing aggressively, if you are getting hit by HE, Spaliner could be viable, but to be honest, don't think so. There are better pieces of equipment. Filling the tanks with CO2. This tank does have a 15% chance of going on fire, but I think I suffered 1, possibly 2 engine fires during my play session. Don't think it's worth it. Enhanced torsion bars, complete waste of time on this tank. You don't need to improve the suspension durability. Enhanced gun laying drive, again, is viable. As I say, the one piece of equipment I have on this tank that I'm a little bit unsure about is vents. 2.9 second aim time is not great, and when you consider poor gun depression and poor gun arc as well, it means you're going to have to go through that 2.9 second aim time again and again and again, in which case an enhanced gun laying drive would be a good piece of equipment. But again, choice is up to you. There are a lot of viable pieces of equipment for this tank. Cyclone filter to increase your engine durability, complete and utter waste of time. Coated optics, again, I think this tank would suffer more with coated optics than it would on the ISU-122S because this tank, I think, is built to be played a little bit more passively. You are going to spend more time sitting still in an ISU-122S than you are in an SU-122-44. Coated optics, they are viable depending on whether or not you like to play this tank aggressively. I don't. I tend to go for binocs over the coated optics. Mainly covered most of that in the last SU-122-44 review, but the choice is up to you. Coated optics are viable. They're even more viable, to be honest, on this tank than they are on the SU-122-44 because you get 350 meters of view range, so you get more bang for your buck with coated optics on this tank, but I still think binocs are better. And a camo net, 100% viable. The camo rating on this tank is quite good. It is a premium tank destroyer, so it's going to have decent camo rating when firing its gun anyway. Camo net is going to make it better. So again, as I say, if I was going to remove one piece of equipment, it would probably be vents, and I would put either a camo net or a gun laying drive on, but choice is up to you. Lots of viable pieces of equipment. And then we come to crew, the other main reason why you would own a premium tank besides the money-making capabilities. The crew layout for the ISU-122S is exceptionally good. As you can see, I've got my ISU-152 crew in here at the moment. Full crew in here. You've got 5 crew members. You got your commander, gunner, driver, loader, and second loader. So that means it gets an extra loader than the SU-122-44 does, and it means you can train up every single Russian TD crew in the game. It doesn't matter whether or not they're tier 1, you're going to need extra crew members, but you could train up your entire tier 2 TD crew in this tank, or you can train up your entire tier 10 TD crew in this tank. As a crew trainer, it is perfect. It matches pretty much every single Russian TD in the game. Another major strength this tank has over the SU-122-44. It's a perfect crew trainer. So while I didn't think the SU-122-44 was bad, I think the ISU-122S is perfect when it comes to crew training. Very, very good crew trainer. Okay folks, time for the overview game, a game where I show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one replay. And in this game you're going to get to see the speed, maneuverability, the troll gun in action, the poor gun traverse when tanks get to your sides and rear, poor gun depression. You pretty much see everything that there is that's good and bad about this tank in one replay. I thought this was a pretty good overview game. So we're here on Redshire. Once again, I'm platooned with Moose and Bringy. You can see while I was playtesting the tank, it was while I was platooned with these guys. But we're not top tier. So we are, it could be worse, could be a tier 9 game, but it's not. We are tier 7s in a pretty tier 8 game. There are 6 tier 8s on the enemy team, a lot of tier 7s, and a couple of unfortunate tier 6s. But I'm going to start off the game playing it like a traditional TD. So I'm going to be moving up, going to be using my using the tank as a traditional TD, using its camo rating. Going to be setting up, I'm going to be trying to use binocs. Just setting up on the corner, trying to edge into position so I get shots on the edge of the rock if the T-71 pokes again. And here we go. Okay, so Sherman Jumbo spotted below. I've got nothing to aim at except the top of his tank, the cupola, and the shot. Look at that. That just a magical Russian accuracy. This is not an accurate gun, but we're able to snipe just the smallest sliver of his tank once again. So the gun is behaving so far. It'll start misbehaving later. But let's get back to pointing at the corner of this rock, hoping for the T-71 to poke. So we've sent a lot of tanks down the 9-0 lines. Quite a few are just one tank down the 1 line. And I decide to advance. So, unfortunately get spotted. Not sure if that was the T-71 or someone else. But here we get to see, once again, able to relocate. The tank is not slow, it's quick enough to relocate. Aim fully, 401 damage. And now here's where the gun can start trolling me, because orange reticule shooting down on a Tiger 88. I bounce, and now here I'm going for a track shot because I want to track him in place, and the shot goes high. So gun is starting to troll me. I want to track him in place so I can get side shots. That time the shot doesn't even reach the target. It's just one of these troll 122 millimeters. But I finally get bored, start shooting him in the side, and someone else tracks him. So someone else manages to accomplish what I couldn't, and you can see the raw DPM in action here. We've already done 700 damage to this guy. And in literally just about 10 seconds, maybe 12 seconds, we've done 1200 damage to that guy. Now here's my mistake. I advance on a T-71. Snapshot without aiming. Okay, CDC, so I have to advance. Now I believe, let me pause it here, because I thought my platoon mate had my back. Moose had started playing World of Tanks again after a break of about 6 months. I thought he had my back, and I was wrong. He was aimed at someone else. So this T-71 is about to exploit my poor gun traverse. Now if I was in an ISU-122S, I would not have a problem here. But this guy gets around behind me, makes a fatal mistake, crosses in front of me, and the rate of fire allows me to get another shot in. And now here comes a Chaffee. And now the traverse speed is not great, but it's quick enough. It is quick enough to kill the Chaffee, or at least track him in place, and the reload is quick enough to finish him off. So enemy tanks can get to your sides and rear, unlike the ISU-122S. But it's still it's better. It is better than a lot of TDs. So a lot of other TDs would have suffered in that position. Not me. It's not great, but it's usable. And now here we come. Now we've got poor gun depression. This is where the poor gun depression comes into action. Now I've got shots up here. I haven't been spotted. And I just can't. I've got a hint to shoot at. No, I just can't get my gun down. I'm trying to get the CDC. I just can't get my gun down. I've got to expose too much of my tank. I just can't get my gun down. I was spotted. Wait till I drop off radar, poke forward. Notice that the T-29 is aiming at me, and we've got to fall back. So you've got a narrow gun arc, you've got poor gun depression, and sometimes it can cause you to miss shots. So again, just hang back. Now, I have a feeling the CDC is going to flank me, but I think he's going to come from my right. Unfortunately, he comes too far to the right, and there you go. Once again, just like the first replay in the review today, I get shot here and it takes out my gunner. Yet again, your gunner sits right here, and this is the first place most tanks are going to shoot you. So you're going to be going through a lot of first aid kits. You're going to be repairing that gunner quite a lot. So I'm down to 44 health. The armor, really, if you're playing against players who know what they're doing, the armor is not great. And I could be having a much better game, maybe if I played a little bit more passively, but I find it very, very hard to play TDs passively. But we're moving up, we're winning comfortably, the score is 10-4. We're on 3k damage, and I've got no shots here. So, no shots on the CDC. So, I know where all the remaining enemy tanks are. 2 tanks are down on the 0 line. I know where the T-29 is, he's in the village. Just the CDC left here alone, so we can be aggressive. He's looking at me, so I wait till his turret's facing somewhere else. I'm pre-aimed, I'm auto-aimed by the way. Advance, and shoot. So there's kill number 3. Okay, so we've killed the T-29, only one tank left on the enemy team, it's an IS. And this is where maybe you get to see the speed of the tank, because I'm going uphill here, I'm doing 20 kilometers an hour. And we've got like 6 tanks, we've got about 6 tanks closing in on the last remaining IS. So, is there any chance I'm going to get this kill? Is there any chance I'm going to be the one who finishes the game up? I would have said no. I would have said no at this point, because, as I say, there are 6 tanks that are closer to the IS than I am. But we're doing 30 kilometers an hour along here. IS kills the Bulldog. We're up to 36 kilometers an hour, then we head uphill again. So the tank, although it's not as fast, I would probably have gotten there already if I was in the ISU-12244. The game would already be over. The tank isn't particularly fast, but it's not particularly slow. Okay, IS is still alive. Am I going to get there? Am I going to get there? Is my gun actually going to behave if I get there? We're still moving in. The IS is still alive. He's just taken out a Rudy. And we're getting there. We're getting there. Don't kill him, Yag Tiger. Don't kill him. And my gun bounces. My gun bounces. So I've got no choice. Kamikaze. No regrets. And we ram him to death, so we get our 4th kill. It cost me my life, but I think it was worth it. So as an overview game, I thought that gave you a pretty good idea of what to expect if you're driving the ISU-122S. The tank, it's not particularly fast, but it's not slow. It can accelerate, it can get around the battlefield. It can be played passively, it can be played actively. The gun arc is small, the gun depression is annoying, the gun handling can be very, very troll. You can snipe a cupola when you've got absolutely nothing to shoot at, and then you can miss the side of a Yag Tiger 88 where the shot doesn't even reach the target. It's just it's a pretty good tank, but it can be a little bit annoying. And the the tank traverse, although okay, is definitely not as good as it is on the ISU-12244. So this tank's going to have a harder time dealing with scouts. It's going to have a harder time dealing with medium tanks. But that was a first class badge and a pretty average game. Well, not a pretty average game, it was a pretty good game, but gave a pretty good overview of what the tank was about. 1181 XP, 3000 damage again, even though my gun was misbehaving in places. 4 kills, I'll take it with a nice ram kill at the end. I fired 14 and hit 13. So even though I felt the gun wasn't behaving, it actually hit pretty much every shot. Penetration was okay as well, even though I felt it was misbehaving. I only actually failed to pen 3 shots, so I suppose the gun did behave there, but it was a little bit troll. Spotted 2, damaged 7, destroyed 4, did 764 assistance damage, so this time my spotting did work a little bit. 61,000 credits earned with a premium account. Again, as a moneymaker, it's pretty good. Remember, it's a tier 7 premium, not a tier 8 premium, so it will make you money, although not quite as much. I think the money-making capability of the ISU-12244 is a little bit higher, simply due to the fact you're more maneuverable and can get to the sides and rear of enemy tanks in that tank, whereas it's a little bit more difficult in the ISU-122S. Okay, folks, time to sum up. Should the ISU-122S appear in the gift shop in the future? Is it worth getting your hands on? Well, the answer is very, very simple, really, and it's thanks to the in-game version of the tank. You see, the SU-152 is a very, very similar tank. It's a bit like my advice when it came to something like the Fury. If you like playing the in-game Easy 8, you'd like playing the Fury. And just like that, if you like playing the SU-152 fully upgraded with 122mm, then you're going to enjoy playing the 122S, because I think the 122S, honestly, is slightly better. I think that even though on paper these tanks are very, very similar, if you enjoy playing the SU-152, you're going to have similar hit points, similar weight, similar engine power, similar top speed, but I think the 122 is better, because it gets slightly better horsepower to weight ratio, which means it accelerates slightly better, it gets slightly better ground resistance, it gets slightly better acceleration as a result, it gets slightly better gun traverse speed on the whole, it gets better armor, no slightly slightly better here. The armor on the ISU-122S is much better than the armor on the SU-152. The gun handling is identical between the two tanks. You've got the same negatives, the narrow gun arc, the poor gun depression, but you've got that amazing DPM. You've got that amazing rate of fire and that amazing alpha damage. The view range is better on the ISU-122S, and the signal range is worse. But overall, I think if you enjoy playing the SU-152, you're going to enjoy playing the ISU-122S even more because it's slightly better in most ways and it gets the same matchmaking. So very, very simple answer. If you want to know whether or not you're going to enjoy playing this, play the SU-152. The other major question is it worth buying if you already own an SU-122-44? Well, this one's a lot more difficult because both of these tanks are excellent, but they both have their niches. I think the SU-152 or 122-44 is a better all-round tank. I think it can be played passively, it can be played actively, it can be played aggressively, it can get into position, it can get out of position, it can run away, it can relocate. Things that the ISU-122S is okay at doing, but it's not as good. The gun handling is almost identical on both tanks. In fact, the only major difference is the ISU-122S has better DPM, but other than that, most of the gun stats are identical. The view range has to go to the ISU-122S, however, because the SU-122-44 is fast and mobile, the view range is less important, and the signal range on the SU-122-44 is better than it is on the ISU-122S. So I think between these two tanks, I would have to give the edge to the SU-122-44 down to its versatility. It's just a more versatile tank. It's not as map dependent. It can do a job on any map it gets onto, including city maps, due to the fact it can flank, due to the fact it's got a faster acceleration, faster top speed, and much, much faster traverse speed. One of the major weaknesses of this, and indeed the SU-152 in-game, is the fact that the traverse speed is not fantastic. It means that light tanks and medium tanks can get your side and rear, and there's not a lot you can do about it when they do. They find it a lot more difficult getting to the side and rear of an SU-122-44 down to its amazing traverse speed. So I think the SU-122-44 is more mobile, more versatile, and if you were to put my hand in a clamp and squeeze very hard, then I would say the SU-122-44 is a slightly better tank, but a lot of it is down to your playstyle. If you like playing passively, if you like playing tank destroyers and using bush mechanics, playing at the back of the map, sniping, then possibly the SU or ISU-122S is better because it has better DPM and it has better view range, but it's really down to your playstyle. If you've got this tank, I don't think you're missing out by owning or not owning an ISU-122S. However, I would say if you're a tank collector, you're going to want to get this tank. If you're not a tank collector and you already own the SU-122-44 and have money, then I think both tanks are both viable. They're both probably worth it. As I say, it's not perfect. The gun arc is terrible, the gun depression is terrible, the gun handling can be very, very troll, just like it is on most other Russian tanks with 122mm. The traverse speed is very, very lacking, even though the traverse speed is not bad. Playing or reviewing this tank straight after the SU-122-44, I definitely noticed a lack of traverse speed. I also noticed a lack of acceleration. Although, having said that, the traverse speed and the acceleration are not bad on this tank. So yeah, should this tank appear in the gift shop, I think it's worth it. But unless you're a tank collector and if you already own the SU-122-44, then I probably would stick with the SU-122. I think it's a very, very, very good tank, and I think if you owned it, you wouldn't regret it, but I've really got to question owning both tanks, unless you're really, really serious about training that extra loader, because it's actually a better crew trainer than the SU-122-44 is, unless you feel that that last loader is being left out and is not getting enough of a workout as a result of owning an SU-122-44, then yeah, it's a very good crew trainer. You could train up the entire crew in this tank, but really the advantages of owning this tank over the SU-122-44 are very, very small, and you've got to question whether or not it's worth throwing out another €30 towards wargaming for a tank that, to be honest, is good, but not quite as good. That's basically just my opinion. I think it's a great tank. I do love playing these tanks, and I have absolutely no problems playing them back to back. But as I say, if you put me to the sword and threaten me, then I'd have to basically say SU-12244 is probably slightly better. But it's still a great tank. It's still worth it. And the choice is really up to you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.